Hey Facebook friends, I just wanted to reach out to all of you. It's very rare that I, go live. It's the first time I've tried to do it. I know that there are some of you, like Crenshaw, who is an absolute queen of it. Crenshaw, I adore the work that you do. But I want to take a moment for those of you that are out there to share with you some of the things that have been going on lately. First of all, we were just in a place in Asturias where I had terrible internet connections, so I have not had a chance to compile and put together videos to personally thank so many incredible people who came out to help us out in the Hill Country in response to the floods. We're still doing more work, but there are some unsung heroes that I have not had a chance to just specifically call out. One is Paul Chamberlain. He is an incredible man, an inventor who has done so much incredible work. In his for-profit side, he's actually rebuilding homes out in California. But took his manufacturing plant, and he was actually donating his forklift, which for those of you that do nonprofit work understand that is actually a huge cost when you have to unload huge things from trucks and whatnot. And we had a lot of water. Thank you, Quaker Oats. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We had water and Gatorade. And when you're trying to unload liquids, that is a big, big, big task. Reverend Todd Collier, Isabel Rosignol organizing that. And as they were unloading all this stuff, and we have video and photographs, we'll put together a real nice compilation to share with everyone. But when they were putting all this stuff together, and yes, you hear birds behind me, there's a nest being built behind me. But when they were trying to pull all this stuff together, they ended up, basically with no place. At the very last minute, the people that were going to be our hub backed out. So now we had huge truckloads of liquids, other donations, and no way to take care of it. Paul stepped up to the plate. He ended up allowing his manufacturing plant to be the point place to receive all of these different donations. And over the course of about a week, he has personally seen to and disseminated all of these incredible donations to the people over there in the Hill Country who are recovering from the floods. So, Paul, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for the work that you did. There are a lot of people now that are being able to have access to the food, to water, to the Gatorade, to all the other resources. Like we had 20 huge boxes of toilet paper. I know that people don't talk about those things, but in a lot of these situations, it's the everyday products that we all take for granted, like toilet paper, like tampons. A lot of women's needs are still out there and needed. People aren't thinking about those kind of donations, but we need those things. And Paul and his team went out and made sure that they were going out into the community. So thank you, thank you, thank you to everybody that stepped up and continuing to help us disseminate all of these different things to the places that needed them, including the Hunt Fire Department. So just wanted to give a huge shout out to all those incredible people, and also to all of you personally. I know that I'm going to forget somebody. I hope I am not forgetting you, but Nina Vaca, thank you. Joni Wynn, thank you for a huge donation. Robertson Wealth and Chase Robertson, thank you, thank you, thank you. On behalf of all the people out there, you've really stepped up to the plate with your contributions. I want to thank everybody else. Mrs. Shelton, thank you for your donations. Everybody that kept coming forward and is still coming forward to help us make a difference in that community out there. They're going to be recovering for some time. So Food Source USA is our particular program within the Memnosyne Institute that did that. And within our team, I want to say again, a huge thanks to Reverend Dr. Todd Collier and to Isabel Rosignol. You all did an amazing job. Switching gears, I want to talk about something that we haven't really done a whole lot on, but we'll be having more video and stuff going out, is our African Bread Basket Project. Some of you know that this is a hybrid between what we do within the Memnosyne Institute and what we are doing with UTF Holdings, and that's because about 2 years ago, we got 160 families out of the war zone in Sudan into the safety of South Sudan. However, the situation is that South Sudan couldn't take everybody, so some of these refugees went in all different directions, and some of them ended up in Ethiopia. A lot of people don't realize if you have darker skin, some countries won't let you in. So if you have a darker skin tone, apparently Ethiopia is more than welcome, happy to have you. And so there are a lot of the Sudanese refugees up there. all this happened right when Trump decided to end U.S. aid. So we ended up in an even more critical situation where our original plan was basically going in and doing a for-profit investment so that these people would eventually, through a lease to own process, own the land, become the farmers of their own property, and be able to sustain themselves, because it wasn't logical that philanthropy could take care of their grandchildren. So we were looking for a way to support them long term so they could have a sustainable life in the future. However, we didn't want to just do this for Sudanese refugees. We wanted to do it for the Ethiopian people as well, so that people locally aren't resenting the fact that there's now opportunity for the refugees that they don't have. So Emmanuel Jal with Wall Africa, his team was incredible, and they collaborated with us. Huge shout out to Lord Andrew Stone, whose concept this was. Huge shout out to Baroness Sandeep Verma, who stepped up to the plate and really hosted us and helped us. Huge shout out to Klu Ngormo, who came forward and was one of the advisors, and of course always to Emmanuel Jal, who was present and very much part of this whole process, and his advisor Tanya. Really huge shout out to all of them. Of course, my husband Joshua Raymond Frank, and David Solomons, who heads up our UK chapter. But thanks to all these incredible people and their work, and on the ground, Bothi, located in Ethiopia, there is now incredible crops that are starting to grow up. People will be able to eat and harvest before the end of the year, and that was the thing that really touched my heart, was that so many people were saying, hey, thank you, for helping, but if we don't do something now, we're not going to be able to eat before the end of the year. But if we can start planning now, then not all of us have to die with the end of USA aid and this new crisis with all these new refugee mouths to feed, along with what already existed in Ethiopia. So now the Memnosyne Institute is really proud to have been able to reach out and to do this wonderful work in Ethiopia. We'll be posting more photos and video of the plants that are coming up over there. And again, deeply grateful for everybody there as well. So again, thanks everybody that helped us out in Texas and the Hill Country. Thanks everybody that helped us out in trying to help the people of Ethiopia. I cannot say enough good things about everybody, and deepest gratitude to all. Also want to just give a huge shout out to the everyday people that are just keeping things afloat in the United States right now. It's a terrifying time to be a brown person and to see what's happening in our country. I have gotten a lot of messages from people asking, when are you coming back? When are you coming back to the United States? And the truth is, I was really torn. Part of me is really scared. And I shared this story with some friends, and I'll share this with some of you that are on here. Back when I was a student at the University of Texas, I was part of a group that was doing play acting and whatnot, and our teacher, our professor, said, hey, I want all of you to dress up as pirates and be ready to be on stage, and we're going to do improv, but be ready to improv as a pirate. And so he told us to really get in costume. And a couple of years before, I'd gone with my parents, John and Deborah Thompson, to do this thing with the local community college was doing on learning about basically English and Irish, basically the UK great writers. And so we went from Ireland to Scotland, down to Wales, just traveling wherever they might have, Wordsworth, that kind of thing. And along the way, my father bought me this little sword. It was about yay big and very blunt, obviously never meant to be used, just very pretty. And I loved it, and it actually began what later became a passion. I collect swords. But this one has never been used, blunt instrument, definitely not a threat. But because I was told to dress like a pirate, I tied it on my hip. And I went from where I stayed at what's called the Castilian, across the drag, to where we were all supposed to go and dress up. And as I walked across, I didn't notice, but there was a cop car that was coming along. And as I was about to enter the building where everybody was all dressed as pirates, the next thing I knew, these cops came out, and they all held a gun guns at me, and they're like, put it down, and I'm like, what? And this woman, she was very nervous, female cop, she's holding it, and if you've ever had someone hold a gun at your head, it's one thing if it's still, but it's another thing if they're nervous, and this woman's going, and her trigger finger's like this, and so I was more nervous by the fact that she was nervous, and she was so nervous that her partner was trying to calm her down. It was like, okay, why don't you put it down? Put it down. They were trying to calm the person whose gun was like this far from my face. And I remember just being terrified. And the next thing I knew, thank God, the professor, whose name I don't know, and I should because I think he probably saved my life that day, he came out, and this very brave man very slowly walked like this until he was between me and the cop. I said, I told her to dress like a pirate. She's in a pirate costume. That's why she's dressed like this. And so she told me, get it, pick up this, give me that knife. I'm like, so I started reaching, like, and then she got nervous again. So I knew if I reached for the weapon, she would have reason to shoot me. So the professor reached for it, and he was this old white guy, so they weren't threatened by him. He reached for it and he handed it to them, and then he untied the scabbard from, and we gave it to him, and then they let me in, to be part of the production because he vouched for me. Well, that incident occurred because in the state of Texas, apparently at the time, you couldn't carry a blade that was longer than your arm. So if you have my small hand, it's not a very big blade. If you happen to be, Shaquille O'Neal, you can carry a big sword. But that put on my record that I had a possession of an illegal record because I'd had the sword. So my father had to get all these attorneys and go down there and fight for that. And and finally, they were able to strike it off my record. But what a lot of people don't know is that with what ICE is doing nowadays, people have been getting traffic tickets that were paid off, or people have had all sorts of funny things. Maybe they're caught as a joint as a kid. But if you have anything that was wiped off, like way back when, they are still bringing that back and using that to cite why they can pick you up for something. And as someone that was not born in the United States, that was adopted and walks around, never leaves my house without having my passport, never leaves my house without having my nationalization papers, I'm very aware. I've taken a walk around the block and been stopped and asked papers, please. I've been on a bus and had people come up with a machine gun and demanding papers, please. That's been my reality since Trump came on the political scene. But, now that they're starting to look at these old things, there's a part of me that lives with terror that someone would pick me up and say, hey, look at this old thing that was wiped off of her record from back when she was, 20 years old. She had an illegal weapon. And the reality, of course, was that it was this silly, ridiculous incident. But what that means for people like me is that we live in forever fear 24/7. And because I refuse to be silent, because I refuse to ignore the fact that I'm in a privileged position, and what I mean by that is I cannot be fired for speaking out. So there are a lot of people that look like me that will get fired if they speak out right now in the United States. But there's no way that I can be silent when people who look like me are directly being targeted. And a lot of people who don't look like me, people who are refugees from Africa, people who are refugees from Asia. There are a lot of people who are doing things right and legal that are being targeted right now in the United States. And it's terrifying to hear and see a politician come out with an 8-foot storied picture of Trump behind him, and that looks like it's from, V for Vendetta kind of thing. And he's saying, if you associate with immigrants, be ready to be picked up or whatever. That's a scary thing because I am an immigrant. And if people look at the things that I do with my life, if they say, hey, like the stuff I just talked about, we are able to help a lot of people, and we're still helping a lot of people in the Hill Country. And it's the contributions of all these people in society, not just Joshua and me. It's all of us coming together. But if I have the ability to coordinate that and have the ability to have the Memnosyne Institute, which is now serving people all the way in Asia, helping with, reconciliation between Japan and South Korea, now that we have the ability to have two, cultural centers, one down there in the Yucatan serving the Maya, one serving the Tolteca. We have the ability to have our work like Food Source, which has saved, as of 2 years ago, I don't know what the largest count is, but as of 2 years ago, it had saved $55 million worth of food that had been thrown in landfills. If we have the ability to have Green Source, which now serves the entirety of Texas, which is an area larger than France. I'm saying that as I sit here in France. We are serving an area larger than a country with, uniting the green community in Texas. If we're able to do all this stuff, we're able to have the UK chapter that is also not just serving the UK, but trying to strive to serve areas that the UK once invaded, which includes parts of Africa. And because of that, the collaboration to help get 60, 160 refugee families out of, out of a war zone into safety, and now we're able to do what I just talked about over in Ethiopia and have plants coming up so that we can offset the ending of USAID. If we're able to do all this stuff, it's because I, as somebody that was adopted and has my melanin, brown skin, can do something good and contribute positively to society. So, when we see all these people and they're like, they're all criminals, no, they're people just like me. And as I say so many times in my speaking engagements, the reason why I can speak to you clearly right now and make any kind of sense to you at all is because my parents could afford to pay someone to put gloves on their hands and train my tongue to say crown and crayon differently. And now I've spoken at the White House, the House of Lords, the UN. All these things have gotten awards, been recognized by the state of Texas, the United States government twice. It's not about bragging. It's about saying that this is the potential of a brown person with my DNA. And it hurts. It hurts to see people who are complicit and comfortable with saying they're all criminals, and just dismiss it. And I've seen people comment on my page, saying, how can you have so much hate to MAGA? I don't have hate to MAGA. I look at people who are MAGA, and I think that they are mistaken, and they think that they're being heard. And I understand the power it takes, to the power it yields to be able to say, you matter, I hear you, and you matter. And that's what the Democrats haven't done. That's what progressives haven't done. And I understand, because I knew going through, Hockaday in a very privileged way, I had friends that were there on scholarship. They were white, and I got scholarships offers because I checked the brown skin box. They made higher SATs, and that wasn't fair, the assumption. And, and I remember my father saying to me, all you need to know is that you qualified, but don't take it because somebody else needs it. And, so I've been in that privileged position my whole life, but I also know that if any of what I've just mentioned is positive and offers a positive force in this world, it is because somebody who's brown exists that wants to do it. And there are a lot of people just like me who have good hearts but don't have my money, don't have my contacts, don't have my influence. And they are still trying to make the best life possible for themselves, still trying to contribute to our society. And that's what's breaking my heart. And my big personal quandary in all of this has been, where am I the most empowered to contribute the most to people? Where am I the most empowered to still be a force for good in this world? If I go back into the United States, will I be stopped at the border because I've spoken out? I've now had, my friend Chelsea Toller told me that she was coming into the UK, and here she was with really powerful people meeting with the royal family of the UK. And, one of the people was stopped because they took 2 hours to look at all their social media and make sure they did not say anything negative about Trump. That's our government, was not letting them out of the country if they said anything negative about Trump in their social media. And one guy apparently had too much negative, so they took his passport and wouldn't let him leave the country. And a lot of my work is most proficient, most powerful when I leave the country. So for whatever reason, I get more of a platform, I get more support, I get more uplifted when I leave the country. And I can take the power that I garner in Europe or Latin America or Asia, and I bring it back, and that's helped lifted me up more in the United States than our own community has. And that's just fact. So, if I'm doing that, then I'm able to be more service. But at the same time, I know that there's a fight to be fought, and so that's why I'm speaking out. And it's not because I hate people that voted for Trump. I will say it is painful. It is deeply painful to know that people are perfectly fine with people with my DNA being targeted. It is deeply painful to know that people voted for someone that said that people who look like me are an infestation. And it's deeply painful to know that people are still supported, even though you're seeing these things, people being taken off the streets. And they are people that, and yes, they are law-abiding. If they show up at the court and they filed and they've done all their papers, they are law-abiding. So let's not joke about it. It's not about being law-abiding. It's about the fact that they're brown or black or Asian. So, it's scary for me. Do I go back in this country and risk going through you know, going through customs, and they take that 2 hours and they find all the stuff that I protested and spoken out about, and they look up and they say, hey, you know, back when you were a kid, you had this possession of a legal weapon, and yeah, it was wiped off and all that. Yeah, it was said it's a mistake, but we don't care. We're going to bring it back now, and we're going to use that to silence you, because that's what it's about, being silenced. And that's what I know, the power that I have right now is that I refuse to be silent. So that's what's scary. That's why I'm not back home yet. That's why I'm taking my time to really think about what is the smartest move for me to do, and how can I be the most positive force for everybody that I'm seeking to serve right now. Because if I do get taken, a lot of people's salaries end. If I do get taken, a lot of programs end. Um, and yeah, I'd like to be home. Yeah, you know, there's a lot of part of me that wants to be more involved, more, you know, but in person. But at the same time, I know that I need to keep funding the things that matter, the things like we're doing in Ethiopia, things like we're doing in the Hill Country. And honestly, I don't know what the right answer is. And I'm just doing a lot of praying on that. It's scary to know what's happening in our country. It's scary to know that, you know, what's more scary to me isn't that there are people like Trump. There have always been people like Trump. You know, my family fought the Ku Klux Klan for decades. You know, there are always people like that. What's scary to me are the masses that are comfortable with it. Or the masses that think that it's normal to have an 8-foot sign of Trump hanging, you know, from a place, like I said, like in Vendetta, or actually more like Mussolini or Hitler, or, you know, there's never, as I put out something the other day, there's never been freedom in a country that hung these things, hung pictures of themselves. You know, a true leader is not about their ego. A true leader is always remembering that they're in service to others. And I know that I'm a flawed person. You know, I certainly have my vanity. I put my makeup on before I do this live thing. You know, I do Photoshop before I put stuff out. I have my vanity. You know, I have my indulgences. I spend money on a pair of high heels that could have fed, you know, six families. I see my flaws. I know I am not a saint, but I also know my responsibilities. And how can I maintain my responsibilities to be in the service to the most people during these insane times, and know, is going back home safe for me? And not just safe for me, is it safe for me to be able to know that I can continue to empower everybody that I employ to do the humanitarian work we're doing around the world, to keep our programs going? Or is it selfish to want to go home and take that risk just because I'd rather be home? Or is it, you know, is it more selfish to stay where it's safe? I don't know. I just know that, you know, God didn't put me in this position to be born at 7:11 a.m. on Mother's Day in 1977 so that I would be adopted into a powerful family so that I can serve myself. And, you know, that's the challenge right now. And I know that there are a lot of people that get frustrated because they're like, if I were you, I would be able to do this, this, this. I do this differently. And I'm very aware. With everything I do, there are a trillion people that say that they would do differently. And I'm sure sometimes you're right. But what I do know is that I'm doing my very best to live life in accordance to what I would call the seat, you know, the throne, where spirit sits in my heart. And I try and listen to that. And that's what I'm trying to listen to now. And I hope that all of you out there who are doing the work that you're doing in your lives, that are struggling to uplift your community, even if it's just smiling at somebody on the street who's homeless, who isn't seen, but really seeing them, maybe buying them a burger. You know, we can't all do, you know, move billions of dollars. I wish I could. I wish I could step in and fund the 22 million that Trump just doxed from our public education system in Dallas, going to mostly black and brown communities. But I give huge props to people like Marcus Russell and Dee Ashley, and what they're doing at commissary is very necessary. When the city of Dallas doxed STEM programs from largely black and brown communities, and they stepped in with commissary is very necessary and offered that, working with Dallas Community College, and they now have graduates that are, you know, working that are at MIT, you know, and they're people that, it's not one hero, it's lots of individuals that are all doing incredible work. And the question is, how do we lift all of ourselves up together as a community so that we can survive through not just Trump, but even if, God willing, this ends and all the MAGA people that are truly a fascist mindset, and I'm not making a separation from that, those that feel like they were never heard, never seen, and often white, who have been struggling economically and said, finally, someone hears us, versus those that are like, let's jail everybody who's brown. I know there's a difference. But, if we can manage to survive this, we're still going to have a lot that has to be rebuilt as a society. We're still going to have a lot that we have to come together. And it's not going to be just about institutions. Institutions do not survive without people. At its heart, institutions are made of human beings. So if we can't find a way to reclaim the fabric of our community, and that means every thread that's separate, just like, this dress I'm wearing, every thread is a different color, but they come together to make something beautiful. If we can't manage to find a way to cumulatively come together as a whole and weave ourselves back together and say, let's take this opportunity to do an even better job of it. But the only way we do that is we don't lose our compassion. The only way we do that is we claim empathy is an absolutely vital part of democracy. Because it's going to take the empathy of saying, somebody that looks at me with hate-filled eyes and says, you're the problem, for me to look at them and say, you're hurting, you're struggling, and you care about the same things I care about, feeling safe, having clean water, having good food, having access to opportunity, and that means access to an education, having health care. If I can understand those things are what you're trying for, and I can communicate to you, and you can hear me sincerely say that I care that you have that, then let's try and connect on that. And let's drop away all the other labels. And let's take a look at what we can potentially reclaim as a society together. That's the only way we're going to survive. I've had people ask if I would run for mayor or senator or something. I have no desire to do that because it looks so toxic. I applaud people like Retta Bowers, like Victoria Neave, who are doing the hard work of battling it out in that incredibly toxic environment. But for everyday people, for every one of us, how do we empower each other? And the number one way we do that is we remove from our eyes all the assumptions. And we say, I see you as a human being. I see you're struggling and you matter. And how can I reach out to you? And how can you reach out to me? And how can you forget? If you think because I have brown skin, I'm part of the problem, how can you look past this and say, I hear what you're saying. You say I matter. You say you care. If I look at you and you happen to have white skin and, and be wearing a red MAGA hat, how can I say, okay, maybe you're comfortable with me being thrown away in one of these holding camps? Maybe you're comfortable with, the poor man that was just picked up and they said, you must be Iranian. It's like, no, I'm not Iranian. And they said, well, we still have a quota to meet. We still have to meet 3,000 minimum a day. So we're keeping you in here, even though we were wrong. Even though this guy had done everything right by the law. How can we get past that? Right now, what I see are people being motivated by fear. I see ICE agents motivated by fear of not meeting that 3,000 a day quota. I see immigrants being motivated by fear of, they hate me because of my skin. I see, people who are struggling, who feel like they don't have any job opportunities being motivated by fear, thinking that immigrants have taken those jobs. I see everyday people who go to the stores who are being motivated by fear that they won't have enough produce on the shelves. I see people who are very knowledgeable and educated about the quality of our food and nutrition being motivated by fear that we're going to have less nutrition because now, the administration is trying to, for example, put huge taxes on Mexican tomatoes because they want to help the American tomato industry. And yet you see someone like Stephen Colbert who, being motivated by fear because his show is being kicked off because he would dare say something like, and this isn't the only reason, but it's an example of the truth he put out there, that American tomatoes are not allowed to be vine ripened like they are in Mexico. They're designed to be grow super fast, and then they're sprayed a color, and then they're going through a whole process, so you don't get the nutrition. Those of you who don't know, the only way a tomato gets nutrition is because it's getting all of that out of the soil, and it takes being vine ripened. That's why when Joshua and I went to the Natural History Museum, they showed it literally is scientifically proven. It takes 4 American tomatoes grown the way we do, where it's made to grow super fast and not get that nutritional value, and we spray paint it and we add all sorts of chemicals to it, versus 1 to equal 1 tomato. It's nutrition from Mexico because it's allowed to be vine ripened. If we could move away from being motivated by fear, we would take the time to realize we need to vine ripen our tomatoes, and then people would buy American tomatoes. We would not be motivated by fear from a truth teller like Stephen Colbert. We would say, thank you for revealing truth to us and making us laugh at ourselves so we can address our challenges as a people. We would not be motivated by fear that there are people out there doing the breaking work of harvesting like asparagus with 1 asparagus at a time with scissors, that most Americans never want to do that work. We would not be motivated by fear, so we would have listened to George Bush Jr. when he was president and said, let's have a actual thing where you're not a permanent resident, you get a legal worker's permit. Much more simple. You come in, you work in the harvest, you go home, we still tax you, we benefit. We would be able to actually make decent arrangements as a people. We would not be motivated by fear, that all the people in melanin are taking jobs from all the people who are white. We'd be able to recognize that we are a common whole community together. This is an opportunity. We could build a beautiful society, a democratic society that respects all. We could do that, and ultimately one day we're going to either be looking back and say, whew, we got close to the edge of genocide and we turned back, thank God, and we looked at it and took it as an opportunity to say, this is what we aren't doing right, let's rebuild together. Or we're going to look back the way Germans do and say, that was a horrible time and it resulted in deaths, because it's already resulting in deaths. As a humanitarian, the things that I see right now, I'm very aware of the deaths that are happening because of the end of USA Aid. To me, that is a genocide. I'm very aware of, the ending of, the HIV, prevention, treatments and whatnot that were going to South Africa that have been cut off, and I'm very aware of the potential land, bomb that could go off, because if you end up not giving people the treatment, you end up basically having a virus that can get super strong and be resistant to treatment. We are, as a society in the United States right now, basically creating a lot of potential bombs to go off around the world, based on poor decisions, based on hate, based on let's stick it to people, instead of looking at compassion, empathy. Compassion and empathy are all we have at the end of the day. It's the only thing we have that will help us survive each other, that will help our species survive long enough to benefit from all these incredible technological advances. As I tell people, we have to have the sociological software to balance technological hardware. And the software, our sociological software, is where we're missing. And where we're missing is what comes from the heart. It's from the compassion. And how do we help each other see that? How do we help each other remember our common humanity? That's the challenge. So, again, my first big live thing, I know that meant a whole lot of rambling, but I wanted to share my thoughts with you all today, and to give a shout out to all of you that are doing such good work in the world, that are really committed to making a difference. And for those of you that were on here that bothered to listen, thank you. I can't say enough how much I appreciate it. Those of you that have been sending me private messages about your thoughts, I appreciate it. And for those of you that really are taking a stand, for people that look like me across the country, and that really understand what it means for those of us that are scared. I never thought there'd be a day when I was scared to go back to my country. I never thought there would be a day. I've always been very, very proud and deeply grateful to be an American citizen. I don't take it for granted. And if anything, the fact that I was adopted and made a naturalized citizen when I was about 5 years old, that's about how long it took the process. And keep in mind, that's from a family of power and means. So imagine if you didn't have a dime, what those years could mean. So that's why when people say they're waiting for the naturalization process to happen, they aren't exaggerating. It takes time. And so even if you try and do every single legal fact, requirement. You are still in a waiting phase. And it breaks my heart to see people who have been doing everything by the law and are being picked up, and even at the moment of their naturalization, where ICE is waiting as if to stop them, to block them from coming in and getting that final court hearing done. You know, what I would ask my fellow Americans to consider is, if you look at me and you look at anything beneficial that I've been able to contribute to society, and again, I recognize it's never just me, it's a whole community of people that created the wealth before I was even born, and people that have been helping me to be in service with it around the world. But if I've been able to be any positive contribution to any of that, that is the potential of any single immigrant, if given the opportunity and the chance to make a positive difference in our society. And, you know, when you aren't born on American soil, you do not take any of it for granted. You work your ass off because you know how precious that citizenship is. And, you know, I was getting to spend some time with my friend Nina Vaca, and, you know, and her story is just so amazing with Pinnacle. You know, it came out of her father, who was an immigrant, being shot, and her saying, I never want to see someone shot again for the carbon paper. Those of you that are old enough remember that, when you would get your 1 year credit card, they would do carbon, and that you could take those carbon papers and, you know, and basically get money, which is why her father was shot. And you see what she created. Pinnacle Group, you know, was recognized as one of the #1 companies in the United States, you know, and now it's an international multi-million company. You know, there are people both on the for-profit and nonprofit side that are contributing in huge ways to our society, and positive ways, and who have done it legally, and who are still being aimed at and persecuted. And, you know, my friend Ravi Shankar, who's been doing incredible work up in New York and protesting, and especially with the Interfaith Service of New York and with Reverend Chloe Breyer, they're just doing amazing kick-ass work up there. You know, he told me, Marianne, I wish ICE would come and get you, because then maybe people would care. People would, because you're rich, you're known. Thing is, I'm not known, I'm not famous. And I've now seen people who have a lot of means who are targeted as well, because it's not about just targeting people with my skin color, it's about silencing. And before I leave today, the one thing that I would encourage all of you is refuse to be silent. Refuse to be silent, because it is not normal that I should be sitting outside the country and be terrified about going back through customs. It's not normal that I should be worried that if I was trying to get out of the country to go do something, that they would take 2 hours to look at, you know, my social media and say, did you speak against the president? If you did, well, you can't leave. It's not normal that I should be worried that they'd look at my social media and say, you know, did you speak against the president? If so, come with us, go in the little room. I've been asked to go in the little room the last time I came back from the UK. I went through everything seemed fine and normal, and I went down to, I had hurt my arm skiing, dislocated it, so I knew the only way to help Joshua was to go and get a cart, and I went to go get the luggage carts, and since I was temporarily separated from him, an ICE agent walked up to me and said, do you need any help? I said, no. He said, do you know what you're doing? He said, yes. Do you know where you're going? Yes. He said, are you trying to find your luggage? I said, no, they haven't announced it up yet. He said, here, come with me. I'll show you where you can get your luggage. And he pointed to the little room. And I said, no, actually, as you can read up there, and I purposely read the words so that he knew that I could read and speak English. And I said, our flight, blah, 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 it's not shown yet. It's yet to be announced. And he looked at me, oh, you can read? I said, yes, I'm an American citizen. I can read English. And I took my car and I run over to Joshua, and I went straight up to him. I said, sweetie, please come give me a big hug and kiss and show physically that you know me. And he did. And it wasn't until he did that ICE agent stopped staring at us. And I knew if I had even gone over there with my car, that ICE agent probably would have taken me, and you guys probably would not know where I am now, because they don't notify anyone. They don't tell the police. They don't tell you that you're taken. So this is why I say I'm living in terror, and why I'm saying, what is the right choice? Do I stay out of the country? And by doing so, make sure that every program that I support and everyone that I currently employ to do our humanitarian work around the world and inside the United States can be reassured of their paycheck, and that the community said, we feed a minimum of 5,000 families a day in Dallas alone, through Todd's program. If he isn't paid, does that happen? Those are concerns. And we're taking legal precautions to try and make sure that things would still be going. But, it's scary. Do I take that risk? And as somebody that has to take CBD oil, and I can go 5 days before I start having really bad seizures, and if I go about 10 days, I'm walking with a cane, and then I'm like this, I have real things that are a challenge, and if I was put into a camp, they deny everybody their medication there. So I know that I would last physically probably at most maybe 12 days, 15. I'd have to be using a cane definitely. Do I risk that? I don't know. I know that I really believe in my heart of hearts I was meant to be a force of good, and that isn't just about me. It's about uplifting all the incredible people, because I'm blessed to say that I serve leaders. I'm not a leader of followers, I'm a leader of leaders, because every single person that works with us, from Angel Salub down, in the Yucatan with Amaya to, Reverend Hiromiano up in, Japan, to David Solomon's over in the UK, Donna Amadei, to Ricardo Cervantes, Luis Kempentecutli down in Mexico. All these incredible people, everybody in Dallas, Philip, Wendell, Thomas, who's creating an AI that's going to be helping the UN to meet the Sustainable Development Goals in behalf of the different countries who are members up there, and working with Chelsea Toller. All these people are natural-born leaders with incredible hearts in and of themselves. My job is to empower these leaders to be the best they can be. Do I do what's safe for myself so I do that? Or do I go home and risk being taken? I do not know. But what I'll say to every one of you is I want to thank you for those of you that have followed me on this journey. I want to thank you, those of you who have been with every step of the way. I want to thank you, those who have donated. I want to thank you, those that have pushed what we're doing with the Memnosyne Institute out there. And I want to thank those of you who have stayed on this and listened. And I see David Call, speaking. Thank you, David. You are an absolute beautiful soul and hero to me. The fact that after you got beat up for, just being yourself, and you came out and spoke about, being targeted by people that were all MAGA crazed. It's a scary thing to do that after being accosted. So my heart goes out to you, and I admire your bravery. And I admire everybody out there that's doing this incredible work as a humanitarian. And thank you all, those of you that have stayed on this and who have responded. This was the first time I've done anything like this. It's just my honest to God feelings and thoughts. And I don't know what the right answers are, but I did feel like that one of the best things I could do right now is to be vulnerable and honest. So thank you. Thank you, everyone.